about to go behind enemy lines.
Roger, 3-2. Goliath copies all. Go ahead. Target is surrounded by multiple firms entering what appears to be a residential area. Requesting permission to engage.
From the People's Republic of New York City, you're now going behind enemy lines with Gene Baradelli and Russ Gallo.
And you are now behind enemy lines. Hey there, how you doing, America? Gene Baradelli here with you on another beautiful night here in the People's Republic of New York City. Glad you can join us tonight, wherever you are across our listening area, whether it be online or on terrestrial radio. Glad to have you with us. We're going to be talking about some controversial topics tonight, and it's a shame that my boy Russ Gallo can't be with us, because we're going to be talking about, yes, race relations in America. Specifically talking about in the context of the verdict of Officer Edward Nero in Baltimore. We're going to get into that. We're going to get a little wonky in some legal language, and I get to be a lawyer. It's going to be fun. Also, we'll be talking with Niger Innes from Tea Party Forward, the chairman of Tea Party Forward, about the Black Lives Matter movement, what he believes is in store for the RNC, and what he has planned instead. So let's get right into it, folks. For those of you who have not been following the news lately, while you're listening to the show, I don't know. I'm not a news station, but I do talk about the news. Let's talk about this verdict recently in the news this week out of Baltimore. One of the Freddie Gray trials, the trial of Officer Edward Nero. This week, verdict came back that Officer Nero is found not guilty after a bench trial of all counts. And this, in my opinion, as we'll see as we dissect the verdict, is justice. Let's get through a couple of the formalities right now. Officer Nero was charged with second-degree assault, reckless endangerment, and related counts of corruption and acts of official misconduct, I guess we'll call it. And he ended up having a bench trial. Bench trial means that there's no jury. It means that a judge is going to decide the case, and a judge by the name of Barry Williams ended up deciding this matter. And when you look at the evidence and you read the verdict, listen, I don't go by news reports. I don't go by analysis by other sites or legal minds or anything like that. I go right to the record. Went right to the court record, read the judge's full decision. For those of you who are looking for it yourself right now, you can find it on Scribd. If you go to Scribd.com, look up State of Maryland versus Edward Nero, you'll get the full transcript of Judge Williams' decision, all 25 pages of it, and you'll be able to read for yourself why the judge decided how he decided in this matter. And when you read these things, folks, understand that the justice system, when it works, is truly colorblind. Understand that Judge Barry Williams made a career as a prosecutor in going after corrupt cops. Understand that he was able to put his bias aside. Even if he had one, whether he did or not, I can't tell you, but everybody is human. Everyone has some sort of bias. Everyone has some sort of predeterminative, cognitive things going on in their heads. Let's not kid ourselves. In this decision, the judge reasoned based upon the standards of the law as they exist today. And at the end of the day, as you'll see, if you read the decision as you listen to this, you will find that in the case of Officer Nero, there is zero, nada, zilch, bupkis, as they say right here in the People's Republic of New York City. Nothing at all, in the slightest, that connects Officer Nero to the arrest of Freddie Gray and the actions that happened subsequent. And by the way, folks, to date, this is trial number 2 now in the Freddie Gray series of trials against the 6 police officers. The first one being against Officer William Porter that resulted in a hung jury. Understand, to this day, there has been no evidence put forth in either trial showing any form of misconduct, any form of corruption, any intent to do harm by either of those 2 officers. Now, we're going to see at least 5 more trials now, because that hung jury, that mistrial, is going to be relitigated, presumably. So you're going to see 5 more of these. This is going to be playing on for a very long time. And as you'll see, when it came to Officer Nero, there is nothing here. Very quickly, let's go through what assault means in the state of Maryland. To be convicted of assault, the state has to prove that the defendant, in this case Officer Nero, committed some sort of offensive physical contact with the victim. The contact was intentional or reckless in nature, not accidental, and that it wasn't legally justified. Now you may ask, what is the extent of Officer Nero touching Freddie Gray? Officer Nero picked up his legs while another officer picked him up by the upper body to put him into the van. And that was it. And this state attorney, Marilyn Mosby, had the gall to charge him with an assault. I don't get it, folks. This, to me, is not legal reasoning. There's nothing unreasonable about a police officer, in his official capacity, lifting someone up into a van with the assistance of another officer, who, by the way, was his superior, as I understand it, and putting him into a vehicle. He didn't go into the vehicle to attempt to strap him in or anything like that. He didn't break any order to not strap him in or to do anything like that. He was in his official capacity as a police officer. You have to understand, folks, the police are human. They are allowed to make mistakes. So if you're saying that, well, he should have taken some sort of affirmative action to make sure that he was strapped in, even though he was ordered to do something else, understand that that's not intentional, reckless, or unlawful if he doesn't choose to do that. It's probably not within his training to do that. What's within his training is to follow orders from his superior officers, which he did. And I'm sure, you can read the judge's decision about the handbook and the directives and the standing orders that are there. But there is no standing order, regulation, rule, or law that Officer Nero broke when it came to this so-called assault. I don't even think we can call it that. By the way, folks, while I'm analyzing this right now, we have a chat room going on at www.BehindEnemyLinesRadio.us. Click on the Listen Live button, and you can check us out when we broadcast live Tuesdays on Spreaker at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Got a couple of comments in the chat room saying right now that Officer Nero may have a good lawsuit against the whole corrupt Baltimore City government. Well, I'm not so sure about that, because the decision to prosecute was by the state attorney, Marilyn Mosby, without input from Baltimore's mayor and reigning buffoon of the year here behind Enemy Lines, Stephanie Rawlings Blake. I don't think that he has a case there so much. Maybe against the state of Maryland because of what can only be described as a novel way of trying to go after police officers. But we'll get into that in a little bit as well. Officer Nero was also charged with reckless endangerment and related misconduct. Now, for reckless endangerment in the state of Maryland, you have to prove that the defendant engaged in conduct that created a substantial risk of death or serious physical injury. Substantial risk being the key phrase here, folks. To do that for a police officer, you have to prove that they're a public officer. Easy enough. Duh, he is. That the defendant was acting in his official capacity. Well, we know that. He was on duty. And to allege and to prove that he failed to ensure the safety of Freddie Gray. by failing to put his seatbelt on during the process. Guys, again, he was never in the vehicle. He was never in the vehicle. He wasn't anywhere near strapped. He lifted someone's legs up and put him into a vehicle. Understand, folks, the evidence available to the state, they had videos. They had witnesses. They had all these things, and none of it pointed to any sort of colorable action here. Nero did not create any offensive or unwanted physical contact that was reckless or intentionally done and not legally justified. He's a police officer. There's a wide latitude there, folks. There's got to be something there that maybe I'm not seeing, but the judge didn't see it either. There was testimony presented. There were interviews done with the defendant. There was, deals made with other officers to give testimony here. The judge did his job well. He followed the letter of the law. I don't know what to tell anybody else here, but my goodness, what a miscarriage of justice it was to probably bring this case in the first place. The theory that the government was working under was that the officer had a legal duty to demand the actual arresting officer to tell him and explain to him the rationale for the stop before assisting. I'm sorry, but does anybody realize how police officers work? It's a very dangerous job. You don't have the time to say, well, officer, can you explain to me why you're doing this at this point? I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. You make decisions given the information you have with the best judgment you can use based upon your training and expertise. You can't stop and say, whoa, time out, hold up, wait a minute. I need to know exactly what's going on before I do anything else. That's how officers get killed. That's how officers get injured on the job. That's how families lose families. I am in no way saying that the procedures in place are adequate. I don't know what happened. I can't say that. There's been no evidence presented to me about this Officer Miller to say anything to me about what happened here. The state was arguing, okay, so going through the decision again, if I'm getting too wonky, chat room, let me know. But to be perfectly honest here, an example of how the officer here should never have been brought up on charges is in the papers brought by the state here. The state actually argued a theory called accomplice liability. For those of you who don't know what that means, that basically means conspiracy. It means people got together, agreed to do something illegal, and then acted in furtherance of that agreement. Yet, criminal conspiracy was not one of the charges brought against Officer Nero. How could you be an accomplice where there is no conspiracy even alleged? Again, I'm being a little incredulous here because as an attorney, these things don't add up. These things don't make sense. You have to prove in a conspiracy that a crime occurred, that the defendant had an intent to make it happen, and knowing that, aided in some way, or communicated that they were ready to support the furtherance of a crime. Where in the world does an officer arriving after an arrest has been made come in and say, yep, I'm all in on the conspiracy, boys. Here I am, I'm ready to go. Come on. It's absolutely ridiculous. Listen, folks, the bottom line here is this. We can go through all the legal analysis, but the judge rightly said, an officer similarly situated by Officer Nero, relying on other officers in the van with the detainee, whether or not he should have been seatbelted or not, is not unreasonable to do. He reasonably relied on other officers. That's what you do when you're a police officer. You rely on your brothers in arms. Officer Nero reasonably assumed and relied that the transport of Freddie Gray would and could be done properly by securing him before driving off. He's not the driver. He's not responsible for the transport. He's assisting other officers. His superior officer was the one inside the van. A gentleman, Lieutenant Rice, I believe. I don't know if it's a gentleman or not. Don't hold me to it, and don't send me any cards and letters. Guys, if there's any justice for Freddie Gray, if you really want to look for justice for Freddie Gray, quote-unquote justice, that subjective thing that everybody loves to talk about, but nobody can really define for everyone, everywhere, all the time. If you're really looking for that, go through the arrest procedures and the transport procedures and make sure this doesn't happen again. Don't ruin the lives of these police officers who did what they were trained to do, but for a mistake that ended up becoming tragic. The rest of this is loud voices, screaming, yelling, protesting, and destruction of property. That's all this is after that, folks. It's actually a very simple, open and shut legal proceeding here, as Judge Williams talks about. But then you get the spin. You get the interviews and everything. Before we get to that, though, I do want to give credit where credit's due. The Gray family attorney had a great statement about the verdict that is kind of getting lost in the shuffle here. William Murphy, an attorney for the Gray family, here is what he had to say in reaction to Judge Williams' verdict.
But the family's previous position has been, and I have no doubt that they will maintain it, that as long as all of the evidence is heard, as long as all of the law is properly considered, and as long as this was a fair process, then justice was done. And to the black citizens in Baltimore, you ought to be proud that such an accomplished jurist with a background in prosecuting corrupt cops had the courage to go against public opinion and render a decision that he and he alone believed was just under the circumstances. We can't ask for more than that, nor should we ask for more than that.
That was Gray family attorney William Murphy. Nice Irish boy from Maryland, I guess. And he's absolutely right. Got some more comments in our chat room saying that this should have been an internal affairs investigation, not dragged into court. They use some expletives that I can't use. Caused a lot of damage by going after cops. Absolutely right, but the damage is to the community. It's damage of confidence in your public safety. Not because of just what happened with Freddie Gray, but the reactions later on by city government in allowing people to destroy the community. You know, there'll be some comments later on. God help me, I got a clip from The View of all places. Calm down, don't shut off the radio just yet. It's actually something constructive, and it also points out how The View stinks. But, well, like I said, we'll get to that in a second. Understand, folks, that at the end of the day, the law on this is pretty simple. If you want to fix the law later on, if you want to fix procedures later on, I'm sure procedures can be tightened up, reviewed, improved, retraining can be done, but this isn't a criminal case. At the end of the day, so far, we've had 2 trials. I haven't heard anything criminal from either one of them. And that's kind of the point that Megyn Kelly brought up with Black Lives Matter movement and failed mayoral candidate DeRay McKesson. He of the 1% vote. I guess that's a different type of 1%er, huh, folks? DeRay went on Megyn Kelly's show, and it's a little bit of a long clip, and I might be interrupting it here or there. But when you're listening to DeRay talk, ask yourself 2 things. Does he answer any of Megyn's questions? And more importantly, did he articulate what Officer Edward Nero did so wrong to merit criminal prosecution?
Do you agree with that woman's statement we just heard, that this is biased and racist to its core, this verdict?
It's good to be here, Megan. And you know, what we know to be true is that Freddie Gray should be alive today. And what the judge said today was that Officer Nero was not found criminally responsible. But it's important to note, as you've done so far, that the mayor and the police commissioner have said that they will conduct an investigation, because we know that in the state of Maryland, that the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights, with the police union contract in Baltimore, and with policies in the city, that almost guarantees that officers will not be held accountable for their actions. So the administrative review that's going to go with Nero is important. And remember that this is just one
court
of
found
6
is there were
cases.
no facts. There were 0 facts to support this charge against this officer. And this is a judge who himself had prosecuted cops, bad cops, for the last 5 years before he took the bench.
It was facts around a criminal. This is a criminal case. So again, what the judge found today was that there was no crime committed based on the current laws.
Right. So my question was, do you
that
accept that, or do you agree with that woman we just heard who said this verdict is biased and racist to the core?
So like I said, Megan, so I agree that this is a reminder that we need to make the laws so that they can hold police officers accountable.
Laws like Officer Nero?
Yeah, so when
what
you
did
think
he do
about
that
his
was
involvement.
wrong?
So again, what this said today was that given the current standards, that he was not criminally responsible. We've seen this play out in verdicts all across the country.
But
where
what did he
officers
do
aren't
that
held
was wrong,
accountable.
DeRay? What specifically did this guy do? Because what the evidence showed us was he had virtually no interaction with Freddie Gray. None.
Yeah, so
I'm going to stop it right here for just 1 second. Do you see what he's doing, folks? You go around for a year and you say, this is criminal, they should be in jail, all this stuff. We're talking about all the officers blanketly. Now when you have a verdict that comes against you, DeRay McKesson is playing a little intellectual dishonesty. He's saying, well, it's more of an administrative problem and the standards have to be changed. But Megyn Kelly is pressing him, what did Edward Nero do wrong that merits review administratively even? Clearly there's nothing criminal. But what is it, DeRay? Tell us.
Did you read the verdict? So that what the judge does say is that he actually did have involvement with the stop, but not the arrest specifically. So he was involved. Freddie Gray should not have been stopped. He was no threat to the officers. The officers were a threat to Freddie Gray. So remember that this is about a range of circumstances today, and it's a reminder that we have to change the laws and the policies in the city and the state.
Don't you see the danger to the community if we start locking up cops for making a bad judgment call?
Do you think that Freddie Gray should be dead, Megan?
Again, not answering the question at all. Of course, police officers who are exercising their judgment reasonably in the course of their duties should not be held to a criminal standard. Officers are human. They make mistakes. The system is set up so that a police officer who makes a mistake reasonably should not be held criminally responsible. Does Edward Nero have to live with the fact that Freddie Gray is dead as a result of what happened here and his part in it? Of course, any person of conscience would feel that way. But come on, folks. There's a difference between personal feelings, personal beliefs, and justice and the law. All three of those are different. Personal beliefs and opinion don't necessarily have to be based on justice or the law. Justice is subjective, and they may not necessarily have to do with what the law says. The law is not interested in justice, it's interested in orderly rule. Let's keep listening to DeRay ramble.
DeRay, my question is to you. Don't you see the danger to the community if you change the laws to make it illegal for cops to exercise poor judgment?
So, Megan, I will never agree that an officer's role is to kill unarmed citizens. Freddie Gray entered that van alive, and he left the van with his spine damaged.
So far, the only two groups to weigh in on whether that was the fault of the cops have concluded that this is a mistrial and that the cop was not guilty. So the facts so far are not coming out to support some sort of intentional harming.
We have 5 more trials. I hope that you're suggesting that because there's one acquittal, that means that all of the other cases don't matter. That's a really interesting
assertion. You're suggesting these cops killed this man. And I'm telling you that while Freddie Gray died in police custody, that has not yet been established.
What I'm saying is that Freddie entered the van alive, and that was not the condition that he came out in.
Okay, I gotta jump in here a second again. I'm sorry for ruining the continuity of the clip here, folks, but come on. Megyn Kelly is right. DeRay McKesson is suggesting that the police did something here to kill the man intentionally. Or by, or through manslaughter, I don't even know what theory he can think of. We can all agree that the death of Freddie Gray is a tragedy. But not all tragedies are crimes.
Right, and who caused it and how remains to be seen. But you're positing to the audience that these cops did it, and I'm telling the audience thus far the evidence doesn't support that.
What I'm saying is that there's one trial, so you don't know what the evidence in the other 5 cases, and neither do I, and that's why I'm excited to follow through these cases.
Well, I know one guy was tried by a jury, and it was a hung jury, so they were not able to conclude his guilt.
Which again is not an acquittal.
And then the next case that was tried by an African American judge concluded that there was no case against this officer,
one case.
And he was just
acquitted. So we are looking forward to the next 5, and that's important. And we'll see the next 5.
But even now that you have a not guilty verdict against Officer Nero, you continue to tell this audience that he did something wrong.
No, what I continue to say is that I'm looking forward to the administrative review and that we do need to take a holistic look at the laws in the state of Maryland.
What did he do, DeRay?
It is still... in Maryland, in Baltimore City, it is okay for officers to hog tie and chokehold citizens. We don't think that that is okay.
That's a separate thing. Okay, so you look at that, but what did Officer Nero do?
So I've already said this to you, Megan, is that this...
No, you haven't already said this. I hope that you're screaming at your radio the way that I'm screaming into this microphone right now. No, you didn't answer the question. That's why she's asked it 6 times. You useful idiot.
Involved in this case, and what the judge said is that the officer was not criminally responsible, and this means that we need to continue the fight to make sure that the laws hold officers accountable. He had no responsibility, as noted in the judge's decision today, to intervene when he saw others misbehaving, and that is important. We should push for policies.
That's not what the judge concluded. He did not conclude that anybody had misbehaved. No, he didn't.
He said that.
Thank you for being here. I gotta go.
Wow. And that's what the left does, folks. They change the narrative when it doesn't suit them. This is a criminal act. Person's found not guilty. This is an administrative wrongdoing. We got more trials to do. Come on. Listen, we're just about at halftime here, ladies and gentlemen, behind Enemy Lines. I want to thank everybody for listening to the show. I'm Gene Baradelli. Russ Gallo is working the night shift tonight. And while you're listening, please check us out at www.BehindEnemyLinesRadio.us. Check us out on the Facebooks and the Twitters at BEL_radio. And if you miss us here for any of part of our live show, you can check us out on any one of our rebroadcast outlets, including WNJC 1360 AM, Philadelphia's Renaissance Station, WJHC 107.5 FM in Jasper, Florida on the Florida-Georgia line, K98 Talk, High Plains Talk Radio and Sackheads Media, and ICRN, the Internet's conservative radio network. And even if you miss us on any one of those rebroadcasts, you can check us out on demand at iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, TuneIn, Stitcher, Podbay, Player FM, and you can discover us on Google Play Music. We're going to take a quick break right now. When we come back, we're going to talk to Niger Innes, the chairman of Tea Party Forward and TeaPartyForward.com. We'll be talking about the Black Lives Matter movement a little more in depth and what plans they may have in store for the RNC and what Niger's going to do to make sure that those plans are totally foiled. And after that, we're going to talk a little bit more about reaction to the Nero verdict in Baltimore and the Freddie Gray trials to come. Gene Baradelli, Behind Enemy Lines. We'll be back right after these brief words.
I'm Vito.
And I'm Vito. And we're from WNJC's The Vito and Vito Show.
Every Friday at 1 p.m., you can hear Vito and Vito bring you the perspectives of 2 college-age millennial conservatives who are committed to defending the principles of free markets, liberty, freedom, and individualism from Brooklyn, New York.
Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Vito and Vito Show. And check out our blog posts and articles at VitoandVito.com.
Vito and Vito Show every Friday, 1 p.m. on WNJC 1360 AM, Philadelphia's Renaissance Station. In Brooklyn,
it's nothing but the truth.
There's a movement in healthcare today. It's a movement of people that's ready to stand up and take charge of their healthcare. It's people like you and me who are tired of paying too much for healthcare and getting too little. People who are standing up for their values and letting their conscience make decisions based on timeless principles. It's a movement that's sweeping the nation, and you need to be a part of it. Liberty HealthShare is leading the movement of people who are looking for an alternative to traditional health insurance. Liberty HealthShare is a healthcare sharing organization of people who are sharing the cost of healthcare in an easy and efficient way. Choose your own doctor, your own hospital, and live out your values in healthcare. Join the movement. Together, we're changing healthcare for good. Go to www.joinlhs.com or call 800-722-8041.
Who might you save?
Your mother, your father, your husband, uncle, aunt, son.
Learn FAST, F-A-S-T, the sudden signs of a stroke, and you could save.
Your friend, teacher, boss.
F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911. F-A-S-T. That's F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911. The sooner they get to the hospital, the sooner they'll get treatment. And that can make a remarkable difference in the recovery of
your neighbor, the waiter, grandmother, grandfather.
So learn FAST, the sudden signs of a stroke, then pass it on, because you never know who might save you.
Your wife, your colleague.
Spot a stroke fast. Visit strokeassociation.org, brought to you by the American Stroke Association and the Ad Council.
Behind Enemy Lines. Back on the air.
Gene Baradelli, back behind enemy lines, and it's my pleasure to welcome back to the show the man who is out there in front for Tea Party Forward, the chairman of Tea Party Forward, Mr. Niger Innis. Niger, thanks for coming back on the show, pal.
Great to be on with you again.
Well, listen, it's great to be on with you. There's so much to talk about, but I got to talk to you about the news that broke this week. Of course, what happened in the verdict coming down in Baltimore, and the timing of it. It seems like you felt, and you have the pulse of what's going on, because I received an email from you and your organization, Tea Party Forward, because I subscribe, and I did so at teapartyforward.com.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Talking about Black Lives Matter and that movement. It seems like it's all pretty timely right now. Why don't you tell everybody all about the email that you recently sent out and the statement you made about Black Lives Matter?
Well, it seems apparently clear to me that the Black Lives Matter campaign, which I think is very wrongly asserted as Black Lives Matter, because it's not really about Black lives. It's about a progressive, quite frankly, communist agenda that is being funded by the likes of George Soros, and that has a mix of white and black and, I guess, Latino progressives. I really think it's about time to call them communists, that have come together that have basically promoted a left-wing Marxist agenda for the entire country. They use the moniker Black Lives Matter, but quite frankly, you have a lot of retreads and recycled hippies from the Occupy Wall Street movement, and they have captured the media's attention and hence the nation's attention. Of course, we know about what they did in Ferguson with the riots, what they did in Baltimore as well, and then of course we know in Baltimore a courageous black judge actually came down and acquitted a white police officer of any charges against the murder of Fred Gray, which of course the Black Lives Matter made a big deal of. There were scurrilous charges that were against this police officer. He was doing his job, doing his duty in the community, and he certainly should not have been brought up on criminal charges. And I think the judge's reaction and the judge's verdict is a reflection of that reality. We have gotten wind through our own intelligence networks that the Black Lives Matter campaign plans to cause a ruckus at the Republican convention, and we are urging patriots, good Americans all, whites, blacks, Latinos, Asians, to come together to oppose them with an all lives matter counteroffensive at the Republican convention. And you can join us in that crusade and support that crusade by going to teapartyforward.com. That's teapartyforward.com.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you mentioned how the Black Lives Matter movement is sort of co-opted by a far-left communist movement. When I was in New York City, when they had the march down by City Hall, when the Staten Island Eric Garner issue was blowing up. And in the crowd were predominantly white, middle-aged people holding pre-made signs for the Revolutionary Communist Party. Thank you so much for mentioning that and bringing that out. Is this really an organized way to try to get Hillary Clinton into the White House, or is this just a way to destroy any sort of Republican movement or any sort of conservative movement?
See, and I think that's a brilliant question that you asked. I actually think it is the first, not so much the latter. The latter is maybe a breadcrumb from the main course, but the main course is to get Hillary Clinton elected. After 7 years, and it will end up being 8 years, of the most left-wing president that we have had, certainly in this, for the last 100 years, maybe going back to Woodrow Wilson. What we have as a result of this failed presidency is utter destruction of the black community. You have unemployment rate among young black teens in cities like Chicago and Detroit and Los Angeles at Great Depression era numbers. And so Hillary Clinton cannot legitimately run on the third term of Barack Hussein Obama. The progressives who have had their agenda pretty much laid out by this president, certainly for the first 2 years and predominantly over the last 5 years, and they have no results from it. They have in fact, they rail against income inequality, and the classes are more unequal than they ever have been since the Gilded Age. There's more income inequality under this progressive, crony capitalist government than there ever has been. And those are the fruits of the most progressive presidency. So they can't run on a record. So what do they have to do to stir up the kind of big numbers that they got in the black and the Latino community in 2008 and 2012? They got to stir up this phony artificial movement called Black Lives Matter and create an unnecessary friction and tension between the police and the communities that they serve.
And you know, folks, those of you listening to Niger in this right now, this is a man who knows from whence he speaks, because this is a man who not only he himself has devoted himself to the cause of civil rights, but he's second generation in fighting for racial equality and just fighting for civil rights. Niger, tell people what a real movement would look like that is fighting for racial equality, gender equality, things like that, and compare it to what Black Lives Matter is doing and sort of the terroristic tactics that they're doing.
Well, that's exactly right. They are terrorist tactics. They are anarchist tactics, and they have nothing to do with what was a very peaceful, integrated, multiracial movement. Okay, that was promoting the American flag, that was promoting American values. What we were saying in the Civil Rights Revolution was we wanted to expand Americanness. We wanted to expand what it meant to be a full citizen of this country. We weren't talking about revolution. We were not talking about certainly a communist revolution. We were not talking about overthrowing the government and the laws of our nation. We were saying we want those laws to be expanded to all Americans. And that is quite different than what this anarchist, communist, inspired agenda of the Black Lives Matter movement is. I mean, just one example, which makes it so crystal clear that this is not about Black lives at all, is one of their planks on their platform is to promote the most radical open border policy in our country, so that you would not only have continued illegal immigration, but you would have massive legal immigration as well. And as we know, when you have too much immigration into the country, and I'm not a immigration prohibitionist, but when you have too much immigration in our country, it depresses wages, and it creates a situation where native-born blacks and Latinos and whites are basically pushed out of the market, because you've got people coming from third world countries that will work for much lower wages. So in spite of these guys calling themselves Black Lives Matter, they really are promoting policies and a progressive agenda that actually undermine black lives all over this country. And that is not the civil rights movement. What we are putting together, which is All Lives Matter, counteroffensive and campaign, is going to be the spirit of the civil rights movement. We're going to take the spirit of the civil rights movement. You know, we have great civil rights leaders like my father, Roy Innis, longtime chairman of the Congress of Racial Equality, Andrew Young, who's still alive, and many others that reflect that peaceful, integrated effort to change our country for the better and to expand the Constitution and its protections, not to undermine them.
And growing up, sir, your father, Roy Innis, was one of the first voices I can remember talking about racial equality when I was growing up. And what a brilliant man, what an amazing legacy that you're keeping. Tell everybody how they can get in touch with you, Tea Party Forward, and get involved with your All Lives Matter movement that's going to be taking place at the RNC.
Yes, please go to teapartyforward.com. That's teapartyforward.com. You can also look for me on Twitter. It's Niger Ennis at TTP, Niger Ennis at TTP on Twitter. You can tweet me. You can go to the website. You can join Tea Party Forward, and you can join this movement, All Lives Matter. I look forward to seeing you all and being on your show again as we get closer to Cleveland in July.
Thank you, Niger Ennis. Tea Party Forward. Everybody, money and people make politics go. If you can't give, volunteer with Tea Party Forward, a great organization. Niger, thanks for coming on the show, pal.
Thank you, my friend. You take care.
The show will be right back. But first, a word from Al Sharpton.
Good evening, Rev. Thanks
Good evening,
to
Rev.
you, Ed. Is this Groundhog Day 2? We are watching that was Attorney General Eric Holder, ABDs, about some Republicans at home are already beating the drums of war. Today, the Pentagon refuted that claim. And he said the American people do not want him to, quote, dwindling, they do not want him dwindling his thumbs. You can get a gig as a contortionist. Intravenous fluids and pills coated with gelatin. We don't leave our women or men in uniform behind. It's a monument to the hubris of Dick Cheney, Representative Raul Labrador. Years of abuse. I personally apologize to Mr. Peebles. Just ask to soon-to-be former Congressman. Democrats are outright jitty. CIA's counterterrorism center. Veteran Affairs Secretary Shinseki. Why do I always mess up his name? Shinseki. I love my critics. I have fun with that.
Politics Nation with the Reverend Al Sharpton starts right now. Good evening, Rev.
Good evening, Dr. Dyson.
But wait, there's more.
And we will much about that be committed. So there's no real conflict. Michael Druniak, including Lincoln himself, Daniel Day-Lewis. Behind Monica Lewinsky, the one and only Trey Songz is here. But Allison Lundergan Grimes, Gina De Jesus. When Gina De Jesus, Tea Party challenger Matt Bivens. People don't want to have their Social Security overall. The Republican savior, Mark Rubio's big night. In evolution and Galileo, this whole thing of Galileo, America's changed. Unless IT and Skillets, President Putin doing something similar back in, it won't change this fundamental fact about the GOP. Just how absurd these attacks is. Nearly 6 months after the dangerous traffic jam, the Thai military says, my friend for many years, Ilyana Van Zandt. There's nothing there.
And they gave this guy a TV show? Let's get back to our show.
Gene Baradelli, back behind enemy lines. Some people in the chat room are saying that the Reverend Al stuff is getting old. I beg to differ. I love giving him equal time here on the show. A lot of funny stuff there. Back to our discussion of the verdict of Officer Edwin Nero in Baltimore, and just a little more about that and the reaction to that. I'm going to do something that has never been done on this show. I'm going to play a clip from The View. Yes, you heard that right. The View. That show. Absolutely. Yeah, this is a little interesting for me too. But I gotta say, one of the co-hosts on there, of course, Whoopi Goldberg is a normal, BS self, but she's put in check by co-host Sunny Huston, who is a former prosecutor, legal analyst, and listen, I'm going to let this play without comment, but listen to the scathing critique of State Attorney Marilyn Mosby.
We just learned that the Baltimore police officer Edward Nero has been acquitted of all charges in the death of Freddie Gray. This is, this sparks conversations all over the place, but I know that you know the mayor. Is she concerned about this?
I spoke to her this weekend. She was very concerned about how the public would react to this.
Right,
I mean, they certainly have a plan in place.
Right.
But remember what happened the last time when he died, because there was rioting. People were very, very upset, and now we see another acquittal. This isn't the first, because there was I think a hung jury or a mistrial the first time around. I could be wrong. But now I think people will feel that they don't have justice. But I have said this from the very beginning as a prosecutor. The decision to charge all of these officers in this way was made very hastily. And I don't know. By the prosecutor, by the chief prosecutor.
But didn't she call for this? Wasn't this a joint effort?
No. In fact, the mayor did not know what the prosecutor's office was going to do. She found out at the same time that all of us found out, which is one of the reasons I think why the city wasn't as prepared as it could have been for some things that happened. So I think there was a breakdown in communication there. But when you look at it, as a prosecutor, you really have to make a well-reasoned decision in terms of how to charge someone. And it takes a long time to put together murder cases against 6 police officers.
And how long did she take, though, the prosecutor?
Less than 2 months. Yeah, less than 2 months. And so that's it's unusual. I've never seen it. I've never seen it.
Was the prosecutor thinking, okay, let me head this off at the pass?
Many people are, I don't know her personally, many people are saying that it was a political decision because we knew that people were rioting. She wanted to bring peace to the city, but that's not how you make prosecutorial decisions. And I don't want to throw her under the bus because I don't know her and I wasn't in the room when they were making the decisions, but I'll just say this, it is very unusual to bring charges against 6 different police officers in a murder case in that amount of time. I've never seen an investigation done that quickly. And now we have not one, but 2 officers that haven't been held accountable for this young man's death in police custody. I think people have a right to be outraged about that.
Well, yeah, but we also want to say that when you burn your own neighborhood down, you are the one who is without.
Yeah.
See?
I know.
When we burn, we're the ones who lose.
Yeah.
So maybe the thing to do is get really mad, protest, and move the process along so it works for us.
Yeah.
But even sometimes when it works for us, it doesn't work. So.
Okay, I just got to say a few things first. The View is leading the scapegoating of Marilyn Mosby. You knew this was coming, folks. When things go wrong, there's got to be someone to blame. Marilyn Mosby apparently rushed to judgment, as we've been saying for about a year and a half. But I don't know exactly what Whoopi Goldberg has been taking lately, but it's definitely nothing that's helping her cognitive abilities. First off, talking about burning your own. Did you not notice how there was like a traveling carnival called Black Lives Matter going around from place to place and basically causing a ruckus, inciting this kind of behavior that burns your own? It wasn't their own burning, Whoopi. It was people doing it from the outside. Come on. And that whole thing at the end there of, we got to get mad and then work within the process. Where were you a year ago talking about, riots and people getting killed in Ferguson, talking about protests that turned violent in Baltimore? Now all of a sudden we gotta calm down? Come on. I can't, the scapegoating is absolutely ridiculous, folks. And it started. I mean, listen, I agree with Sonny Hostin's, Hostin, I hope I got your name wrong, right or wrong, I'm sorry. I hope that people recognize now, hindsight being 2020, that when you are moving to quell the mob, you are moving towards disaster yourself. Mobs of any kind, whether it be racial, white, black, indifferent, whatever, angry citizens of all stripes, you don't cater to the mob. You don't cater when emotions are high. You make reasoned decisions. That's what Judge Barry Williams did. Judge Barry Williams basically said, listen, this officer didn't even have the duty to put the seatbelt on Freddie Gray. By the way, you haven't even proven that there is such a duty that existed at this time. Therefore, how can they be a crime? You could be upset that Freddie Gray is dead. You can be upset that if you think that the system of public safety has failed him. But there's a difference between failures of system and crimes. The family, will never be made whole no matter what here. You're just compiling tragedy upon tragedy upon tragedy by using a rush to judgment to quell the maddening crowd. And speaking of the maddening crowd, the Baltimore Sun gave us a sample of some of the things that were being said after the verdict was announced and it got out to the public. Just listen to some of these statements and let's talk about it after.
He represented the police force. Whether he was trained properly or not, he represented a police force. He needs to be held accountable for his actions, and the police force needs to be held accountable for not properly training. Accountability is a must. We must hold these officers accountable, hold our systems accountable that represent us.
You understand? It's not right. It's not justifiable. You got crooked cops out here. You got good cops. I'm not blaming the good cops, but at the same time, right is right and wrong is wrong. Come on, be honest, y'all. This city needs to wake up and smell the coffee. If it was your child, you would want that officer to be convicted. It's not right.
People shouldn't be in neighborhoods if they're not trained to work with the African American community.
Son,
so all these guys
can I say something on your behalf?
So now, people should be convicted for lack of training of a crime. And that's coming from a reverend named Wesley West saying that there should be accountability for the lack of training and he should go to jail for it. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works, people. Lack of training is not a crime. Even forgetting your training is not a crime. Even making a mistake in the course of your duties, even though you were trained properly, is not a crime. Come on already. We can't let, and this is hard to say, you cannot let the fleeting passions of individuals rule the day. Baltimore made that mistake already. And what did they get them? Stores burnt, families torn apart, tragedy upon tragedy, billions of dollars of damage, and Freddie Gray is still dead. The mistakes here also come from the prosecutor. Forget about the rush to judgment. How about Assistant Prosecutor Jan Bledsoe talking about police, quote, jacking up citizens? Yes, that's actually on the record in the trial of Officer Edward Nero. Isn't it time we let the adults handle the conversation, folks? Isn't it time that we let reasonable people determine the path of our society and not allow passion or prejudice to rule the day? You know, I'm reminded of, if anybody remembers the book and the movie, The Bonfire of the Vanities. A great novel, pretty good movie with Tom Hanks and Melanie Griffith and Morgan Freeman as the judge there. Another example of letting the passions of the mob dictate behavior. In politics, that is what happens. Listen, politics is ruled by loud, opinionated people, polling, and people with money who have opinions and want to be loud in a different way. That's not how justice should be run, though. Justice, I've been saying, is kind of the subjective idea of what we all believe is right and decent. But what's right and decent here is not to go after a police officer for a year and a half for lifting up the legs of a person who had been arrested and in custody and assisting your superior officer in putting them into a van. That does not warrant prosecution for a year and a half. That does not warrant an entire city turning on the police force. That does not warrant or justify the destruction of property of ordinary citizens who are just trying to make it through life, personally, professionally, in every way possible. Edward Nero lifted a guy's leg up and put him into a van. And here I am talking about it for an hour on the radio with you fine people. Listen, I love doing it, but I think we can all agree what happened here is a tragedy that was compounded by a government tragedy. And the real basis for the tragedy, folks, is decades of mismanagement and progressive policies in Baltimore that just repeated mistakes and kicked things down the line, created a society of dependency on government. And when government failed Freddie Gray, what did you expect, Baltimore? What did you expect? Listen, we got a few minutes left here in the show for some final thought stuff, and I'm going to reserve that right now to make an announcement for all our listeners and a call for all our listeners to help out the show. In case you haven't heard already through our social media, specifically on Facebook, Behind Enemy Lines Radio has been nominated as a finalist in the top 10 for the People's Choice Podcast Awards. Check out podcastawards.com. We are in the top 10 for the news and politics category, folks. Behind Enemy Lines is making big waves. We're in there with some of the top shows in news and politics on the internet, from Canada, from all over the United States. It's an honor to be included with them, but now we need your help. Starting Sunday, May 29th, we're going to ask all our audience to go to podcastawards.com and do two things. The first thing is you're going to vote for Behind Enemy Lines Radio in the news and politics category. The second thing is you're going to vote for, I'm going to ask you to at least, vote for our good friend Andy Chavarria and his show The Intersection in the religion and spirituality section. He too is nominated for a podcast award for 2016. Listen, folks, this is a great honor for all of us here Behind Enemy Lines. I want to thank all the people. We had over 100 nominations that I know of that got submitted from our listeners, our friends, our family. And I even bribed my liberal sister to do it, promising her fame, fortune, and riches, I think. But listen, it's going to be an exciting 2 weeks. Polls open the 29th, and you can vote every day at least once for 2 weeks after that. So we're going to ask you for your vote, and we're going to thank you for the nomination. It's been fantastic, and just another sign how Behind Enemy Lines has been growing from station to station, and we love it all. Also want to give a shout out to our listeners at WNJC 1360 AM. This is going to be our last show on your network. We thank everyone for listening. We thank Rick Trader at Conservative Commandos Radio Network for having us, and we wish everybody at WNJC and Conservative Commandos Radio nothing but the absolute best as we each move on down this road, and hopefully we'll meet up again sometime along the way. But for now, folks, it's time to shut this sucker down. I want to thank everybody for listening. I want to thank Niger Innes for coming on the show. Check out TeaPartyForward.com, folks. Check them out, and listen, if this show taught us anything, be vigilant. Be aware of everything. Keep fighting. Keep believing out there. It's time for us to shut things down. I want to thank everybody for listening. Good night, everybody.
Our position has been compromised. It's time to roll out. Report for debriefing at www.behindenemylinesradio.us and look for regular communications via Facebook and Twitter at BEL_radio. You are the resistance. Behind Enemy Lines. Part of the Conservative Commandos Radio Network. a rock radio production. Copyright 2015. Back in 7 days. Out.